And I just want to say how excited we are to see you all here. When we envisioned this evening, we didn't know whether we were going to have 20 or 50, and we're probably closer to 170, and meeting our major goal is having lots of young people here. This is a very special evening. It's the 4th annual John and Chara Haas Award for Peace and Social Justice. I am Pat Harner, Vice President of the Board of Project for Nuclear Awareness and former Executive Director of Physicians for Social Responsibility. Thank you for finding this such an important topic that you did not want to miss it. I don't think you'll be sorry. We want to get rid of the psychic numbing, as Helen would say, around the issue of nuclear war and engage old and young people and help the younger folks to understand that they can have an impact to ensure a future of new, clear skies. And the younger generation might ask, if you guys have been working on it for 70 years, what do you expect us to do? And I think that's a really good question. So there are different tools now. And we would hope that you, with youth and social media, might be able to help us older folks who don't do that so much, move this issue forward so that we can rid the world of nuclear weapons sometime soon. And because we believe that fervently that youth can make a difference, we have inaugurated and will be giving the first Eisendrath Award for Youth Advocacy to a person who is committed to make a difference in the area of nuclear disarmament. This moment is going to be made even more poignant tonight because Craig Eisendrath may join us. As many of you know, Craig has been challenged with the ravaging disease ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, for a number of years. What has not been challenged is his steadfast commitment to a world free of nuclear arms and a prospect of global peace. Nor has his dignity or joy of life been challenged. He is putting forth an enormous effort to be with us this evening, and we will acknowledge him formally when he comes a little bit later. We have collectively been working on this topic for 70 years, as I mentioned before. PSR started in the early 60s with a group of physicians who said, in the event of a nuclear war, there'd be nothing we could do. Everybody would be toast. So they worked very strongly for many years to get the whole issue of nuclear war on sort of a back burner. More recently, Project for Nuclear Awareness was founded by Craig Eisendrath and Ed Aguilar with generous support from John Haas to address this critical issue. Our theme, New Clear Skies, a Vision for a Nuclear-Free World, is apropos because of our distinguished guests, who are all folks who have pioneered and dedicated their work to a world free of nuclear weapons. When I was considering my remarks tonight, I kept coming up with why. And when I saw Helen Caldicott's article yesterday in the Inquirer, the same theme appeared. Why, after 70 years of attention to this issue, are there hydrogen bombs aimed at every city in the US with populations of over 50,000 people? The US and Russia own over 22,000 hydrogen bombs on alert today. Why? If indeed this is a matter of political will, as Helen suggests, why is this topic not addressed by the current presidential candidates? Someone who can weigh in on this is Trudy Rubin, perhaps, acclaimed Inquirer columnist who's sitting to my right. And she just got back from Russia last evening, so we're hoping to have the latest scoop about what's going on over there and how the changing politics, may influence this issue. Trudy will engage our honoree, Helen Caldicott, in dialogue that promises to be an energized and inspiring, not expiring, exchange. What can we do today? To introduce Trudy is Chris Satullo, a former colleague of hers and Executive Director of News and Civic Dialogue at WHYY, our co-host for this evening. Chris?
Thank you, Pat, and welcome to you all. It's great to see such a great turnout. I have two happy tasks that I will try to perform as quickly as possible, the first of which is to welcome you to WHYY and our new space back here. The part of the building that you're in is called the Hamilton Public Media Commons that opened last year. The room in particular you're in is the Lincoln Financial Digital Studio. The space in general is available to the community for events like this, and is also on a day-to-day basis, and you can actually see that happening in the two classrooms just across the hall there, is a center for media training for everyone from the ages of 6 to 86. We have people in here throughout the day and throughout the weekend learning how to use digital media, how to use audio and video, and the web to tell stories that are meaningful to them in a way that's meaningful to them. So if you're at all interested in learning how to do that, we'd love to see you back here as part of the Public Media Commons programs. It's wonderful to have PSR and the Project for Nuclear Awareness here. Pat Harner and I have made much mischief over the years, so it's good to see her again. And Craig Eisendrath, I assume most of you know him, is probably, when he was in Perfect Fit and Fiddle, one of the most eloquent and most reliable and most aggressive letter writers to the Philadelphia Inquirer I ever had the joy of talking to. And Craig usually shared his thoughts with me on a weekly basis about what we might be writing in terms of editorials, or who we might want to have on the op-ed page, or who we might want to invite in for a visit. He was one of the really, really great and effective advocates this region has ever known. So it's wonderful to see an award in his name. My other happy task, as mentioned, is to introduce my great friend and former colleague, Trudy Rubin. Most of you know her very well, so I won't spend a lot of time, but I just want to mention some of the key facts. Graduate of Smith and the London School of Economics, writer of the Worldview column for the Inquirer for going on 20 years, author of the book Willful Blindness, one of the best analyses of how we got into the misbegotten Iraq War you could ever read, and one of the most energetic, indefatigable, and analytical students of the international scene left in American journalism. And I always am proud to say I'm a friend of Trudy's, because you know the game 6 Degrees of Separation. Well, there's not a single world leader whose name I hear on All Things Considered or BBC World, shameless plug for WHYY there, who I am not within 3 degrees of separation from, simply because I know Trudy Rubin, because she knows everybody, because she's been everywhere. And so it's my great delight to introduce to you one of the great journalists American journalism has ever produced, Trudy Rubin, who is going to be your moderator or questioner tonight. Trudy.
So now I have another wonderful task and someone to introduce you to that many of you don't know, and that is Cherie Eichholz, who wears many hats. She is an Army veteran of the Iraq War and past executive director of PSR in the state of Washington, which focuses on the nuclear issue. And she moved to Philadelphia, and we were very fortunate that she joined as interim executive director not only of PSR, but of PNA as well. She wears many hats, and she also has a stopwatch. So she's going to be the timekeeper tonight, and I take great pleasure in introducing Cherie.
Thanks, Pat. As Pat said, I am a veteran, and with that, if you are 5 minutes late, you are way late. If you are on time, you are late. And if you are 5 minutes early, you are actually on time. So tonight, we have this delightful little Liberty Bell that I'll gently tap if people start to run over a little bit. I have just these 2 jobs tonight, and I'm very happy about that. One is that I get to keep the time. The other is that I get the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Helen Caldicott. I had comments prepared here, and I think they're nice. But this thing occurred to me this morning as I was thinking about attending the Bruce Springsteen concert last night, which was fabulous. And we're sitting there, and I don't know how many people the Wells Fargo Center holds. I would guess 15,000, something like this. And we felt very lucky to get tickets at all. And this morning, as I was thinking about the concert and thinking about tonight, I was thinking that how wonderful it would be if as many people knew about Dr. Caldicott and the issue of nuclear weapons as know about Bruce Springsteen. I shudder to think. I think that we might very well have a lot fewer nuclear weapons now if that was the case. Dr. Caldecott has been a steadfast nuclear abolitionist for nearly 40 years. She's a pediatrician, and she's just this tremendous asset to our cause. And I am delighted to introduce her. I'm delighted to welcome her on behalf of the Project for Nuclear Awareness and Philadelphia Physicians for Social Responsibility. We have a special introduction for her, and with that, I welcome Dr. Caldecott.
Now, America's got 14 Trident submarines. On each Trident, hold it up again, students, on each Trident are 24 intercontinental ballistic missiles, and on each missile are 8 hydrogen bombs, much bigger than the Hiroshima bomb. So that there represents a Trident submarine with all its missiles and its bombs. And there are enough bombs on that to almost destroy most life on Earth. And you've got 14. Now that's excluding the Minutemen III missiles in their silos in Dakota and Colorado and the like. Each Minuteman missile has 3 hydrogen bombs. So in toto, you've got about 12 or 1,300 hydrogen bombs on hair trigger alert, which in itself would create nuclear winter and the end of life on Earth.
This might be a good time, now that we've explained that, on a positive note,
Thanks.
to start our dialogue.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be here, a great pleasure to meet you,
Thank you.
and a wonderful pleasure to be at an evening that's going to honor the extraordinary human being and wonderful friend, Craig Eisendrath. So altogether, a perfect combination. One can just only sort of bow down to his feet at the courage he has shown in the past couple of years. And hopefully we'll all have the chance to do that too. Now the timing of this evening is perfect since President Obama was just in Seoul at a nuclear summit, although not very much was accomplished in terms of dealing with the issue of reduction in weapons. So let me just start by asking you, so far in the Obama presidency, and given that in 2009 President Obama called at Prague for ultimately a world without nuclear weapons that he said he wanted to work towards, how would you rate him so far on what he has been able to do or not been able to do? And I certainly would like to ask you about some specific issues that have been on his agenda, but how do you see overall his efforts, successes, and failures?
Well, he's had a tough time. He was present at the Million People March in Central Park in 1982, where I spoke. And he was a young student, I think, at Columbia at the time. And he wrote 2 articles really stressing that we must produce abolition of nuclear weapons. So I think it's deep in his soul. Then he got elected. And I think it's very tough to deal with the Pentagon, and extremely tough to deal with the military-industrial complex, which really runs the Pentagon. Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and Raytheon are the main ones, but there are lots. And I just went through the airport at Dayton today, And all along the wall were these advertisements for people working the drones, the predators sitting at their desk. And those people have to have psychological help because they actually see on their screens body parts when the drones drop their bombs. But all sorts of military hardware. And it was General Dynamics and Northrop Grumman. I actually felt quite nauseated walking through. And I wondered what on earth people are thinking as they look at these things. Well, anyway, so Obama got in to do this. He got the Second START Treaty through. But Senator Kyle said to him, "We will not ratify that treaty with Russia unless you give us $83 billion, I think, for new nuclear weapons," which he did. And then Senator Kyle voted against ratification, as he is wont to do. So here we have $83 billion for new nuclear weapons facilities. Now, one was in Los Alamos, and they've cancelled that because of the budget deficit. One is in Kansas City to make non-nuclear parts for nuclear weapons, and the city council brought that in because it was great for jobs, like have jobs to blow up the planet. And the third one, I think, was in Tennessee for uranium enrichment facilities. I think Obama's heart is in the right place, but I think he's stultified by the powers that be, and don't underestimate the powers of the Pentagon or the military-industrial complex which run your country, and your tax dollars, you spend $1 trillion a year on death when you don't even have a free healthcare system. And you're the only Western nation in the world without one, and I know the Supreme Court's discussing it now, but in Australia, I'm a physician, and I've worked here at Harvard, and parents couldn't afford antibiotics for their dying children of cystic fibrosis. But in Australia, we go to the doctor, we have our treatment, we pay, we go next door and get the money put in our hand in cash by the government. So therefore, you spend most of your discretionary budget on, and I'm talking as a physician now, death systems, and not on life.
I've just come from Russia, actually not yesterday. Yesterday I came from Paris. It was beautiful, but I was very recently in Russia. The new president-elect, the longtime Tsar, Vladimir Putin, is a man who likes to beat his chest and wants to restore what he sees as the criminal destruction of the Soviet Union. He would like to restore the powerful image of Russia and, if possible, restore some of the empire. This is not a man who really thinks that zero nuclear weapons would be a good thing for his country. I'm wondering what you think are the prospects that the United States and Russia will continue to build down, as called for in New START, the Second START Treaty, and whether you think the problem really is missile defense, which Obama modified in order to make the point to Putin that this was not intended against Russia, but was really intended against pressure from Iran. I wonder whether you think that Putin is interested in building down in numbers, and whether he, as much as anything else, will be an obstacle to lowering at least the numbers between the two great possessors of nuclear weapons.
Well, I haven't talked to Putin. Have you?
No, but I've spent a lot of time in Russia.
Yeah, I know, but you haven't asked him directly what he thinks.
If I asked Putin what he thought, I wouldn't learn any more than most people would learn in asking Putin. And I think he is quite public and quite clear in his statements about wanting to restore the grandeur of Russia. And he has said publicly that the destruction of the Soviet Union was one of the great tragedies, perhaps the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. I think his mindset is fairly clear.
Okay, so I've been involved too with Russia for many years, and I've met Gorbachev, and I met with Reagan for an hour and a quarter in the White House and held his hand during that time because he got pretty uptight and didn't know any. I'd just written my book Missile Envy, and he didn't really know anything, and I diagnosed clinically his IQ to be about 100 and came out and said I thought he had impending Alzheimer's, which he did. But after that, he started to say nuclear war must never be fought and can never be won, which was amazing. And he started working with Gorbachev, who saw our film, The Last Epidemic, on Soviet television about the medical effects of nuclear war. And Gorbachev himself says he brought the Cold War to an end because of the medical risk of nuclear war. Now, the Russian early warning system, their satellites are so dilapidated they hardly work anymore. They've got over-the-horizon radar systems which work. The policy of America still now is to fight and win a nuclear war. Now, how do you do that? First, you send a missile over and, quotes, decapitate, this is Pentagon language, and this is your policy, decapitate Moscow. In other words, kill Putin so he can't press his button. And then you send over your missiles and drop 2 hydrogen bombs on each of their missile silos, because to penetrate deeply enough to destroy the missiles, you've got to have 2. And the language is you kill the missiles and collateral damage is billions of people dying, and you win the nuclear war. So apart from the fact that you'll all die of Fallout 2 and nuclear winter doesn't enter the Pentagon's thinking. Now, the Russians don't want to lose their nuclear war because they've got the same mindset as the Pentagon, which is why I want to write a book called Why Men Kill and Why Women Let Them. So they've dug a great big cave in the Ural Mountains, and they've got a single missile there called the Dead Hand. And if they see Moscow being decapitated before they lose their missiles so they can launch them and kill all of you, they launch the Dead Hand, which by itself sends a radio signal to all the missile silos to launch without any human input. So that's the background. Both countries, I would say, have nuclear psychosis. And the problem is that both countries have thousands of weapons on hair trigger alert, which take only half an hour to go from launch to land. The other country picks up the attack and it's all over in an hour. There are 40 hydrogen bombs targeted on New York as I speak, and Robert McNamara and I wrote an article for the LA Times about that. 60 on Washington. Every town and city in this country with a population of 50,000 or more is targeted with at least 1 bomb. Moscow, 60. The whole of Russia, you've since the Cold War ended targeted China. Europe, England, Canada and Australia. Now, from data from meteorologists who work out global warming, the data is as all the bombs land on cities, a huge toxic cloud, and the nuclear reactors are all targeted too. And you've got 104 with as much radiation in them as 1,000 Hiroshima-sized bombs, and Europe's covered with them. And as the toxic black radioactive smoke rises up into the stratosphere and covers the Earth, it blocks out the sun for 10 years, inducing a short ice age, and everything and everyone freezes to death in the dark. Now, according to an article I read 2 days ago, there are 1,000 hackers into the Pentagon system per day, 10 million a year, but of the serious ones, 1,000 per day. Now, you can imagine a 16-year-old, and these are all computerized, these weapons. You can imagine a 16-year-old boy without a well-developed frontal lobes, and I've got a grandson like that, you know, like he's just getting hair and he's just absolutely up to lunch, and his mates walk around the house, you don't know what they're going to do next, but they're brilliant. And a very brilliant 16-year-old could think it was sort of kind of fun to blow up the Earth. So and China's hacking into the early warning system. We nearly got to within 10 seconds of nuclear war in 1995 when you launched a weather satellite near Moscow from Norway, and they thought they were going to be decapitated. And Putin, a hardened alcoholic, they opened the football for the first time ever in the nuclear age, and he had 3 minutes to decide. And that's what Obama gets, 3 minutes to decide. And he sat there, and just 10 seconds before that 3 minutes elapsed, the missile veered off course and he closed the football. So as I looked at the history of what's been happening as a physician, looking at the history as I would with the patient, I don't know how we're still here.
Why haven't Obama and Medvedev, do you think, taken the missiles off hair trigger alert? After all, that was something that Obama said he was going to work on.
Good question. I don't know. But I mean, I don't have the answers, but nor do I speak often to the Pentagon people, although I did get General Cartwright to agree with me to go to Cantico, the Rockefeller estate, and meet with the senior people in Russia who control the hair trigger alert and the senior people in America, and the Russians won't come unless you get the senior generals here, to have a 2-day conference behind closed doors with no media to talk about why they're still planning to blow up the earth when Russia and America are now friends. And then I did a silly thing. I rang the Defense Department and I got on to Gordon England, who was the Undersecretary of Defense, and I think that he spoke to Rumsfeld, who's clearly a sociopath. And then I could feel General Carter backing away. He was going to introduce it and chair the whole day. And after that, I had the money and everything, you know. I mean, how could anything be more important than to get these people together to discuss why they're planning to blow up the planet? And you know, I knew Carl Sagan, and I once said to Carl, "Do you think we're the only life in the universe, Carl?" And he paused for a long time, and he said, "No." "Yes," he said. I said, "Why?" He said, "Because if any other species had reached the stage of development that we've reached, they would have destroyed themselves."
So here you have the US and Russia unable to get off hair trigger alert 20 years after the end of the Cold War. So this is big problem number A. How much do you worry about proliferation from nations that are trying to get bombs, namely Iran, for example, which could cause proliferation throughout the Middle East, and then we have a whole new set of problems. Not to worry about young Kim in North Korea, where Obama